We're back, folks. Freedom Forum on this, the 24th day of the 9th month, year of our Lord Jesus Christ, 2014. Heavenly Father, give us the strength, the wisdom, and the courage to do your will in all things. We ask that you would move amongst your people in the land. Move amongst them and encourage them to do your will in all things. In Jesus the Christ's name we pray. Amen. Well, folks, it's too quiet.
Jim's not here.
No, it's not because of him not being here. It's just too quiet, except this weekend in New Iberia. Don't go to the Sugarcane Festival. I do have a, where'd it go? Oh, there it is, okay. I got a reliable report that ISIS has been found in Texas, Arizona, and Southern California, along with Syrians and Afghans. Now, not sure, it's a very cryptic message. Not sure if those Syrians and Afghans are connected to ISIS, but it's ISIS, Syrians, and Afghans are here and they're armed. Texas, Arizona, and Southern California. That's the third report we've got of ISIS in Texas. The other two reports, if you recall, were right after Labor Day. Houston PD picked up at least one member of ISIS. Again, we don't know how many for sure and what they were picked up for. My source is unimpeachable, and he's saying his source is 100% accurate. So we'll add that to our list of intel reports. And no meeting tomorrow. This is the fourth Thursday. Our next meeting will be next Thursday. First Thursday in October already. Jeez. Oh well. There's going to be a bunch of new meetings we'll mention next week. We have more on them. Okay. Newsy stuff. I was watching Bill O'Reilly today, was being interviewed on a couple of the Fox shows. Talk about incestuous, but that's okay. Normally I don't listen to O'Reilly, but I wanted to see what he had to say. Plus they had a new book he's just gotten out. The Death of Patton, or Killing Patton, George Patton, the World War II general, who died under very mysterious circumstances. O'Reilly's convinced that with the evidence he presents in his book, Patton was murdered, which is what I've thought for a long time. He thinks it was probably the Russians that did it. I'm not so sure. This sounds like a very interesting book because he gets into some details on the personalities and events surrounding the Allied honchos, Eisenhower, Churchill, FDR, and Stalin specifically. So I may have to buy Bill O'Reilly's book. I'll let you know what happened, because I have my theory about what happened there, why he was murdered, and had even contemplated writing my own alternative history as to what he was planning to do if he had not been murdered. But that's another story we'll get to after I get the book and take a look and see if O'Reilly covers the topic that I am interested in with regard to that. Then I'm going to come back to O'Reilly, but we got a piece of good news this evening, well, late this afternoon. As reported on Cam Edwards' show on the Sportsman Channel at 5 o'clock, 1700. Shaneen Allen has gotten a piece of good news, and so has all of us who are supporting her. So have all of us. This is the Pennsylvania mom that had a concealed carry permit and her weapon with her with her two small children when she wandered into New Jersey and got stopped on a minor traffic offense by a New Jersey state trooper who subsequently arrested her and hauled her off to jail because she admitted, as she was supposed to, that she had her pistol with her and she had a concealed carry permit from Pennsylvania. Well, since it's not recognized in New Jersey, they were going to throw the book at her. And the DA, the district attorney that was handling this, or is handling this, is the same one that had let one of those football players slide after beating up on his wife. He let the guy have this pretrial diversion stuff, whatever they do, to not, it doesn't go on their record, they don't go to prison, don't go to jail, etc. He wouldn't do that with Shaneen Allen. Well, today he reversed himself and said he's giving her community service and doing this diversion thing. Okay? Well, the suspicion is he did that because he got such a rash of calls about this. Emails, letters, all kinds of stuff over what he was doing to somebody who was an innocent party, had made a mistake only, and admitted it when she was stopped. This made the DA look like a real piece of garbage, and so he's backed off, which is good. This is what we were praying for. Of course, she doesn't get her gun back, which is a crock, but that's to be expected in this day and age. Some state trooper, or even the DA, is going to wind up with that in his collection. But that's a piece of good news. It's a whole lot better than 3 years in jail, which is what she was faced with if it went to trial, which she was going to fight it in court. She wasn't going to roll over, and she had some good legal help too, which is probably also a reason why the guy backed off. He was going to have to spend lots of money on the trial. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hey, buddy, you'll appreciate this one. I had a friend come in from Canada, and they had a $25 baggage charge. They wouldn't take cash. They wouldn't take a debit card. It had to be a major credit card.
That's bizarre.
Now, isn't that kind of strange? They wouldn't take cash or anything. So we bought him a prepaid debit card today, or prepaid credit card.
Yeah.
And you have to fill out you have to give your Social Security and everything, even if it's for $100.
Yeah.
So we're going to a cashless society, I guess.
Yeah, that's what we're headed for. That's bizarre.
Just more of the same there, bud.
Oh yeah, we know. It's getting deep and deeper and deeper. I got a couple of things that I've gotten the last couple of days that are bizarre as far as what's going on in the world. There was a man that was arrested for doing the right thing. I got that right here.
What do you think about them bombing some oil terminals today, supposedly?
Well,
it's all nuts.
Well, it is, because they had to be selling that oil somewhere. ISIS had they had to be selling it to somebody. All they got to do is apply pressure to whoever was buying the oil. Now, somebody like Halliburton's going to get to rebuild that, aren't they?
Oh, well, yeah, Halliburton stock ought to go up. And the other thing about it is we had a super tanker sitting off of Houston. It had 1 million barrels in it. And there was a judge that ruled on it. I think we talked about this about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mentioned
that. They
that.
could bring it in and sell it, but then it disappeared off radar and nobody knows where it went. But it was okay to sell it. And it was their oil.
It was ISIS oil?
Well, it was embargoed oil, so
there was one report, I hadn't heard about that one, that disappeared. There was the tanker of Kurdish oil. Now,
it may have been Kurdish oil. It's all the same. Somebody's buying it for.
Well, the Kurdish oil's okay though. The Kurds are good. The Kurds are the good guys though. They've been using this. See, what was it? 800.
Is there really a good guy over there?
Well, yeah, the Kurds. They're not. See, they're not Muslims. That's why they're getting picked on by everybody over there. The Kurds are. There's two groups. I can't think of the. It's an old sect that they belong to. I can't think of the name offhand. We mentioned it on previous show, but, and there are also some Christians in the Kurdish race, the Kurdish nation. And so the Muslims don't want to, although what's odd is that the Turks are letting this oil, the Kurdish oil, go through their country and be loaded onto at their terminals on the Mediterranean. That's what's weird about that stuff, because them and the Kurds don't get along, and that's supposedly one reason why the Turks don't get involved against ISIS right now, is because they're afraid it's going to embolden the Kurds, who they've been fighting for 30 years. The Kurds have wanted independence out of Turkey for 30 years.
Well, but we'll never beat them because we won't ever fight them like they have to be fought. And by the way, did you see where they had a female fighter pilot from one of the Emirates over there flying a mission? I bet you it was hard flying with all that headgear she had to wear.
She had special ones.
Yeah, I doubt it. But have a good one. Be listening
All right.
to the show. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's weird over there. It's really weird. Well, this dovetails with something else I was going to tell you that O'Reilly said today. He had an interesting solution for the military aspects to this thing. He said that it's not our phone, okay. He said that they ought to form a mercenary force, and he gave some number that was totally inadequate, 50,000 or something, to police that area, or the world in general, which 50,000 won't be sufficient to take care of just ISIS. If something else happened, then what are you going to do? So, but his notion was all these military guys over here and other places that are out of work, they hire them, pay them real good, and use them against folks like ISIS. And he said the U.S. would train them with help from these other countries, and the U.S., they'd be under American leadership. I don't know why. Why do they need to be under U.S. leadership, for crying out loud? The other problem, of course, is that who decides when they get used? The countries that are contributing the troops, or let's say that NATO, they're formed under auspices of NATO. NATO then has a meeting and votes whether or not to use these guys, and of course all of NATO is going to have to vote whether they contribute anything or not. Now, if it's the UN doing it, what does that get us back to? That's a UN offensive military force then, which officially they haven't been allowed to have. This is why the UN is continually sticking their nose in things, putting peacekeepers on the ground who then mess up. If you put military people on the ground for any reason, they've got to be able to handle things militarily. You don't use them for police. Now, these mercenary guys, O'Reilly didn't mention whether they're going to be primarily police or primarily military. He implied they were going to be military. But even so, this is just another version of NATO peacekeeping or UN peacekeeping, or one of these other groups that has peacekeepers. The African Union, or whatever they call themselves, has peacekeepers separate from NATO and the UN in Africa. There were also peacekeepers under the auspices at one point of, what's that group that's out of the Central Asia? Russia's part of it. The Stans are part of it. China's, there's several countries there that have been contributing to this group, and they actually use them in a peacekeeping role in some of the troubles along the Russian border in the last several years. So O'Reilly's idea on the surface has some merit, but then when you start looking deeper into it, it's going to fall apart. So sorry about that, Bill. We'll stick with trying to read your book. All right, anybody else has any good news, pass it on. The Shaneen Allen thing is, that's good news. That's, now, what I was mentioning with that caller, the good news was Jesse Daniels of Clyde, New York, saw some young fellas vandalizing a home. Now, they didn't say where, if this home was his or somebody else's. They implied it was somebody else's that was vacant. And so he detained them. He locked them in the house until the police could arrive. This house was being renovated. These guys splattered paint on the walls and cabinets, smashing counters and walls with hammers, spray painting filthy words and derogatory comments toward women on the walls, and breaking windows, causing about $50,000 in damage. They were arrested on felony burglary and criminal mischief charges, but Daniels was arrested, charged with 4 counts of endangering the welfare of children. Okay. What's wrong with this picture? What is wrong with this picture? Oh, that's New York, excuse me. Clyde, New York. Never mind, we know what's wrong with this picture. It happened in New York. Now, the writer of this from PatriotHeadquarters.com, he queried philosophical. We wonder why our society is so messed up. How did the parents of the boys react? Instead of being humiliated by the actions of their children, by their own lack of parental skills, they complained to the police that Daniel should be charged with additional crimes because he scared their children. Oh, poor babies. Do it? They don't say. But causing $50,000 worth of damage to this house, and they were scared, poor babies. They needed to be scared. They needed to be scared at a lot younger age than they've been scared here. But once again, folks, this is a symptom of the times. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about Second Amendment. Here's an article that, when was that dated? Yesterday. Entitled, "The Second Amendment's the Antidote to Lone Wolf Terrorism." From Canada.com, ISIS to Canadians, quote, "You will not feel secure in your bedrooms." Canadians have been getting some threats, obviously. The spokesman for them, for ISIS, called for attacks on Canadians on Sunday in an apparent attempt to deter members of the military alliance that has formed to challenge the terrorist group. And he said, "Rely upon Allah and kill him in any manner or way, however it may be. Do not ask for anyone's advice and do not seek anyone's verdict. Kill the disbeliever, whether he's civilian or military, for they have the same ruling," etc., etc. Here's the message that these folks want to pass on. PoliticalOutcast.com. And he's sending this letter to the NRA, JPFO, SAF, and all other Second Amendment advocacy groups, which is why I got it. Islamists want you to tremble in fear at the threat of lone wolf attacks. And by the way, there was one today in Canada, or was that yesterday, where a young punk with a pocket knife attacked 2 police officers outside a police station, wounded both of them, but they killed him. Well, the cops were wounded. No telling how bad. But back on the lone wolf attacks, this is a key example of why America's founders provided us with the Second Amendment. Actually, it's the second most important part of our Second Amendment, right? No state security agency can guarantee your protection from all potential harm. Citizens are an integral part of the defense of the homeland. While ISIS and others hope to flood YouTube with videos of more innocents being beheaded. It's up to everyday Americans to take responsibility for their own safety and the protection of our neighbors. Article 2 enables us to live in vigilant peace, knowing if enemies threaten. Millions of faithful citizens are ready to respond and to provide cameras with a very different scene. Do not cower in fear, Americans. Stand up and defend freedom. Well, it's not just the lone wolf terrorist that our Second Amendment protects us from. In the past, it has protected us from foreign invasion, twice that I'm aware of, probably more than that. The most well-documented was the beginning of Second World War. After the war, sometime after the war, at a conference, a naval conference held in Japan, I believe it was, some American naval officers asked some Japanese admirals why the Japanese did not invade the west coast of the U.S. after Pearl Harbor. And the Japanese admirals said that, to quote Admiral Yamamoto, at the time was the chief of staff of the Navy, the head of the Navy at the beginning of the war, he said that every other American house was armed, and they did not want to get into that quagmire of having to fight for every other house on the West Coast and beyond. So they chose not to invade us. You see, they knew the state of the U.S. military at the time on the West Coast. And these admirals asked, didn't y'all know that our military was in bad shape? We had almost no forces at all on the West Coast. Everything was in Hawaii. There was almost nothing on the West Coast immediately after Pearl Harbor. And the admirals, the Japanese admirals, admitted that they were well aware of the situation. Their intelligence was very good. They had agents on the West Coast. They'd had agents on the West Coast just as they did in Hawaii for years before that. But those agents also told them, yeah, there may not be military forces, but a whole lot of these Americans have hunting shotguns and rifles in their closets, not to mention things they brought back from the First World War, the veterans from the First World War, which they did. First World War vets brought back a lot of handguns, captured rifles, even machine guns. So Japanese didn't want to mess with us on the home front. Well, that's the prime reason for Second Amendment, is to repel invaders, with the secondary to repel domestic invaders, not just foreign ones. So, well, folks, same applies to terrorists that want to pick on us. And I'm convinced that that's why there have not been some major terrorist incidents in this country to date. The government will brag about how they interdicted. We've talked about that before. We're not talking about those kinds of events. The only terrorist incidents that were stopped by civilians, it was stopped because civilians were alert. All these other terrorist incidents that were supposedly stopped by the FBI were bogus anyway, except maybe some of the stuff that's going on now. We don't know for sure about the current crop of things going on that have been reported to us. But the government has not been doing very well when it comes to stopping real threats. They claim they have, but by the same token, the ones that they lay claim to, that they take credit for, most of them have not been done without the help of informants, and the folks that were the bad guys were actually talked into doing it one way or another. They would not have done anything if the government had not helped them. So, let's see. Continuing a little bit on our Constitution, I want to read from a book written by somebody that, can y'all recognize this clown here? This is Benjamin Netanyahu, Fighting Terrorism. How Democracies Can Defeat Domestic and International Terrorists. He wrote this back in the last century. This was copyright 1995 by Benjamin Netanyahu. As I'm reading this, think very carefully. It is clear that a fresh look is needed at the way the United States presently chooses which liberties are worthy of protection. The ideal of an absolute civil liberty, whether a leftist liberty such as absolute free speech or a rightist liberty such as the absolute right to bear arms, should be tempered by political realities. And the attempt to apply it in its pristine form has grave consequences, according to Mr. Netanyahu. Bibi is his nickname. We'll call him Bibi from now on. When a society tries to grant such pockets of unlimited freedom, it provides the proverbial 99% of normal citizens with supposed, and he uses the term supposed, rights, with rights in quotes, that they neither want nor need. The, quote, right, unquote, to call for the murder of what they deem an obnoxious author, or the, quote, right, unquote, to own a grenade launcher, period. But there are always those in the other 1% who have granted such freedoms are capable of coming up with ways to abuse them. In fact, it's just such supposed rights that are needed to transform a handful of odious but essentially impotent lunatics at the edges of society into a seething menace capable of turning that society into a shambles. Well, let's stop here a moment. He's saying that 1% of you people out there are going to abuse your absolute rights. Okay? And you're going to abuse them to the tune of turning society into shambles. 1%, 350 million, let's say. So 1% of 350 million is, real quickly, 350,000 people? I'll take 350,000 people. But where's all these 350,000 people he's talking about? If they're turning society into a shambles because they're exercising their absolute rights, it gets better. Wait. Advocates of absolute civil liberties forget that legally protected freedoms are not ends in and of themselves. They're a means of ensuring the health and well-being of the citizens. I think he's schizophrenic because he's right. They are means to ensuring the health and well-being of the citizens. That's why we have them. The United States Constitution, said Justice Robert Jackson, is not a suicide pact. And when a protected right in practice results in the encouragement and breeding of terrorist monstrosities ready to devour other members of society, then it's clear that such a right has ceased to serve its true end and must be either revised or reduced. As I wrote on the margin, BS. And that stands for bull fertilizer.
Barbara Streisand.
No, not Barbara Streisand. She wasn't, politically, we didn't agree on some things, but she wasn't this bad.
Okay.
Okay, not Barbara Streisand. Bull hockey. Wait. At the Johnson Institute's 1979 conference, Professor Joseph W. Whale of Yale University inquired into the question of whether the U.S. Constitution could be made to square with firm anti-terror measures such as had been adopted in Britain, Germany, and other European democracies. After all, the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution appears to prohibit convictions on the basis of self-incriminating testimony, which is just the kind that secret services are practiced in obtaining in interrogation. It similarly prohibits depriving a citizen of his liberties without due process of law, which is exactly what an arrest without a warrant is. The Sixth Amendment guarantees the right to a trial by jury, and yet the British found trials by a lone judge to be a crucial step in obtaining convictions because the Ulster citizenry had become so intimidated by terrorists. Okay, there goes the rest of the Bill of Rights right there. But we do have the lack of a trial by jury when it's called what? The FISA courts? Foreign Intelligence something or other courts? They're only judges that sit in there and pass judgment on warrants, etc. Secretly, okay? There is no due process in those courts. We already have that. We had it that back then, too, back in when this book was written. Yet Bishop's conclusion was that even under the rigid civil liberties orientation of the American Bill of Rights, the courts had consistently upheld the authority of the executive branch to curtail civil freedoms where there was compelling evidence of a threat to the security of the United States if these unlimited liberties remained in force. No, that's not true. Okay. Curtailing civil liberties has been a continuing process. But as far as in an emergency type situation, the courts, the highest courts in the land, have said throughout that these emergency things, as I mentioned last week, were null and void. They should never have been done. Now, he goes on, and especially about Article 2 of the Bill of Rights and how that needs to be curtailed, something fierce. But I'll tell you something about the context of this and other things that have occurred in this country recently within my framework. I say recently because I haven't been here 1,000 years. I haven't been here 100 years. I've only been here 65 years. But in that time frame, back in the 80s of last century, I had the opportunity, and I had to pay for it myself because the company I worked for would not send us to do it, to attend a terrorism seminar in New Orleans. And at the time I was working in the field, and it was expected back then, this was during the Reagan administration, that the terrorists at that time that were quite verbose, they were blowing up airliners, etc., back then, some in flight, most of them on the ground. But there were going to be major terrorist incidents in this country. Any day now there was going to be major terrorist incidents. Well, back then there was not such a raft of concealed carry legislation. There were very few people, relatively speaking, that we know of that were carrying firearms with them on a daily basis, besides the law enforcement types. Yet we did not have major terrorist incidents here. We didn't have Department of Homeland Tyranny either back then to stop them, because they didn't do it for whatever reason. This was back in the time frame when bin Laden's personal secretary was going to school right here at USL. And I knew it. I had sources, and we knew he was here. Okay? In fact, one of his professors at USL, after the 9/11 shenanigans, they found out that he was at USL, and I don't remember his name, but it's immaterial. But this professor, I remember the interview on one of the local TV stations, if not both of them, where he was all upset because he could have left, this terrorist could have left a bomb in the classroom, and we wouldn't have known it till it blew up. Well, this guy, once again, was playing to the cameras in all likelihood. But the odds of, and I told my people back then and the folks that I was in commune with back then that the odds of anything happening here at the time were slim and none. What's the old saying about messing in your own nest? You don't do that. And these terrorists, these wannabe terrorists, were smart enough to know that you don't do that. So I wasn't concerned about anything here. Now, the facility where I worked, which was not here directly, it was close by, 30 miles down the road, but it would have been strictly it wouldn't have been damaging to national security, unquote. It would have been strictly a thing like what this punk kid did in Canada in front of the police station. It'd be simply to make a statement, which back then the terrorists were good at that. Well, they're still making statements, only now they're getting more publicity with the 24-hour news feed, the multiple channels, the multiple networks, the social media garbage that this stuff is going through. All of this heightened level of entertainment that people are getting out of the electronic media of various kinds, even to the point of multitasking while they're going 70 miles an hour on the interstate, texting and watching interviews and such on Facebook. This is one reason for this stuff being so much in the forefront now. It's also one reason that we can expect there in all likelihood to be some things happen in this country because of the media effect. And the media is breeding this. Believe me, they are encouraging this by their coverage, their ad nauseum coverage of things like these school shootings. These school shootings, it's a fact, Jack, that these school shootings were encouraged by the news media. Directly, people, directly. And don't tell me that the news media professionals don't know about this stuff. They know exactly what they're doing. And by encouraging this stuff with the type of coverage they've given it, these unfortunate school shootings, hey, why didn't they just shut up about it? Nope, can't do that because the other networks will talk about it, so we got to talk about it. No. Terrorists, remember the definition of a terrorist includes kill one, terrorize 1,000. Kill 100, terrorize 1,000,000, etc. So, this is what this is all about. Now, this clown here has more blood on his hands than almost anybody in the recent past. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, Tom, you remember whenever that nobody could fly and they got that Bin Laden, the Laden family out somewhere, they were up north or something like that?
Oh,
They
yeah.
They were able to leave.
They got the Bin Laden family out 9/11/01, or the next day.
Was that son-in-law on that plane, the one that just got convicted?
I don't know.
That'd
They're
be
not going to
very
tell you.
interesting, wouldn't it?
They're not going to tell you if he was, because then it would make him look even worse. Because if this guy is such a mean old nasty terrorist, why did they let his whole family go within less than 24 hours after the 9/11/01 event? They were secreted out on two airliners that flew despite everything else being grounded except military aircraft.
I was just curious as to know if he
But-
was on there. Like you said, they won't let us know, so we probably never will know. Okay,
Well,
Tom, you have a good one.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point he brought up. Put that on the list of stuff we're going to talk about when I mention certain questions about 9/11/01. Bin Laden's family was tight with in fact, they may even be related with the royal family of Saudi Arabia. Oh, well. Let's see. Talking about the social media. I sent this out lately. this had leaked out, this information had leaked out before, but not in such detail. So I sent it out again, and you need to be reminded of the fact that the military was partnered with Facebook to conduct a massive PSYOP. Okay, so now we've got the NSA, we've got the CIA, the military, all partnering up with Facebook on nearly 600,000 of you folks. Okay. It was done to observe how people would react when their accounts were blacked out and then lined with propaganda, which is similar to what the other project we had heard about was, if not on the same level, maybe in the same project at a different level. They didn't go so far as to black out their accounts on this other stuff that we'd heard about. But the project was done without the knowledge or consent of the users. The government's trying to control people, and they're testing out their ability by using experiments like this. The aims of this, the Minerva Project, are outlined in a brief that Facebook recently published, and the experimentation had been spearheaded by Jeffrey T. Hancock of Cornell University. Stay off of Facebook, folks. Oh, I got to be on Facebook. I've got to be on Facebook. I have no life other than Facebook. You'd think some people had no life other than Facebook. And of course, it's going to be the end of their life if they don't stay off of it when they should be driving a car or walking. Let's see. Let's take a hike down the Grand Canyon. You can do foot hikes down the Grand Canyon, or maybe just take a mule ride down the Grand Canyon. And see, the mules would be easy because you don't have to do anything except hold on. The mule knows where to go. The mule's smarter than the people. So you could do the mule and probably get away with it, going down the Grand Canyon on a mule and doing your texting while you're doing it. Plus, you could take some what do they call those things when you turn the camera around and take your own picture? That's that new word, yeah. Yeah. Bizarre stuff. It's bizarre out there what this country has deteriorated into. Oh, well. Netanyahu does not deserve any more. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Oh,
Yo.
I had a thought. Obama's experiencing the American welfare system, but it's military now. In other words, we doing all the work, nobody wants to help him in the foreign countries.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the American welfare system here.
Yeah, it does, actually. You're right.
Yeah.
That's a good parallel.
So he's getting it firsthand, but with the military.
Yeah. And of course, what Bill O'Reilly's suggesting would be much the same thing, because he wants the U.S. in charge of it, the U.S. doing most of the training, the U.S. having all the command function of this thing, being in control of it. So I guess O'Reilly's not the guy that people think he is he? O'Reilly is just another elitist, is what he is.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting, his book, though. I'm going to have to...
I had that thought when I hung up with you this afternoon. I had that thought.
Yeah,
I said it sounds like the working people in America going to the grocery store, seeing the welfare person with a basket full of groceries, and the working people have half a basket full of groceries.
that's
what it reminds me of.
Yeah, I've got some stuff on that in here about how the American people are tired of being the policemen of the world. And poll after poll is showing this. And
Well, if they're not the policemen of the world, they're going to have the strap-on bombers over here. They're going to have all these people coming here and doing what they're doing in the foreign countries to themselves over here.
yeah.
So it don't make sense.
Well, the rest of the world wants us to be their policemen. They want to. You've got to ask yourself about this current situation with ISIS, or whatever you want to call them. It started out where nobody wanted to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it leaked out that, well, we need somebody to do something, and they kept hinting around that it should be Obama. Now, these were the foreigners. And France was the first ones to step up to the plate. The French were the first ones to send aid to the Kurds, military aid, that they were supposed to have already gotten, because some of the stuff that was given to the Iraqi government was supposed to have gone to them, and the Iraqis never sent it to them. Something like $800,000 worth of munitions and other hardware. And so the Kurds were on their last legs. They were about to be overrun completely.
Mm.
The French helped them, and the French started actually bombing ISIS targets before the U.S. did, this last go-round. Now, supposedly in this last batch of raids, yesterday and today, these 4 or 5 Persian Gulf countries were supplying aircraft or some other assistance for those operations in Syria. Excuse me. And the problem I have with that is, where is Turkey? Where is England? Oh, I forgot, the Prime Minister of England has to go to Parliament to get permission to do it. Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait. Somebody else also has to do the same thing.
But he don't.
But he didn't, no. Why? Why did he wait? Why did he wait to start this after Congress went out on the election recess? Okay? The day after Congress adjourned to go politic for their re-election campaigns, he starts a bombing. Is that coincidence?
Nothing's coincidence.
No, of course not. Because he didn't want, even though the Republicans in Congress especially were chomping at the bit to give him approval to go to attack ISIS. Okay? They were chomping at the bit and and they were going on the talk shows and they were whining and fussing and et cetera. Well, the Republicans in this case did not pass any kind of resolution stating that they would give him authority to attack. Why didn't they do that? Oh, because he's supposed to ask? They're playing politics too. Both sides are playing politics on this thing.
What a gang we got, don't it? Then
Well, I'm not saying we should have attacked Syria, this last attack. I don't believe we should have. But we should have gotten these other people to take care of business. Turkey has the most to lose in this whole situation. But you know what the problem with the Turks is? They just made a deal to have a bunch of their diplomats released that the ISIS had kidnapped. And you know what upsets me about this stuff too? They claim that these people that were allegedly, and I say allegedly because there's some evidence that these videos, these beheadings were faked, at least one of them, maybe all of them. But the thing about it is, why does the media say that these people were assassinated? No, they weren't assassinated. They were brutally murdered.
yeah, really.
They weren't famous people, so they weren't assassinated. An assassination is the murder of an important individual. That's what the definition is, basically, of an assassination. Why did they say that these individuals were captured? Why didn't they say they were kidnapped, etc.? The wording is very peculiar in all of this. It's as if the media knows the truth behind all this stuff, but is not telling it. And so they're trying to couch it in phraseology that, well, we never really thought, in case it should come out eventually, which it probably won't, like that earlier caller said, we're never going to know the truth about a lot of this stuff. But all these countries that are giving it lip service, like the earlier caller said, one of the pilots for one of the Gulf states is a female. That's bizarre. Now, some of those like the UAE or one or two of them are very liberal when it comes to the way they treat their females. They can actually drive, etc. Obviously, that's one of the countries that one belongs to. You're sure not going to find a Saudi female flying in the Saudi Air Force. That ain't going to happen. But anyway, this thing is bizarre, and it does not need to be handled by a mercenary corps that's going to be basically uncontrollable. It needs to be handled in-house over there.
Good luck.
Yeah, well, again, they've already allowed thousands of people to be killed by these murdering thugs. And of course, those murdering thugs were supplied initially and supported by the U.S. government clandestinely. So,
Well, if we all knew what the government does.
yeah, I know. And of course, that's the conundrum they're in now with wanting to support other rebel groups in Syria. Some of the groups don't want our help, don't want the U.S. government to help them. They have thrown their support into with ISIS against the Assad government. It's that old Arab saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That also tells you something wrong. There's something seriously wrong with Mohammedanism. If somebody is morally corrupt as ISIS can find friends amongst other Muslims that are not so, quote, morally corrupt, what does that tell you? Oh, okay, the lesser of two evils. Is that what we're looking at? No. ISIS seems to be the worst of the evils, worse than Assad. Why are they kicking in their support for the worst group that has surfaced, apparently, over there? It's a bizarre situation. It's bizarre. Anyway, thank you.
All
Hang in there.
right, have a good night.
Take care of yourself. Yeah. As somebody said today, if those countries won't help themselves, what are we doing there? Pull out. Of course, I said that last week or a week before. These are a bunch of Daesh cutthroats. Daesh, D-A-E-S-H in English, is a derogatory term in Arabic. Somebody needs to call and let me know how that's pronounced. And if you can say it on the air, what it really means, because I couldn't find that out yet. But that's what they are. However, we have a few of them here in this country. Y'all hear that? It sounds like a toilet flushing. It sounds like a toilet flushing on the air. That's the elevator. So, anyway. My question is, why did Congress go out on their election? Why did they take this election recess with all this stuff going on in the world? Oh well. Okay. Remember this, folks. Never, under any circumstances, ever become a refugee. Die if you must, but die on your home turf with your face to the wind, not in some stinking hellhole 2,000 kilometers away, among people you neither know nor care about. Ragnar Benson, the great Ragnar Benson, who wrote a lot of good. Look him up, R-A-G-N-A-R Benson, B-E-N-S-O-N. Look him up. You'll find some interesting books by him that have the real world and how to respond to the real world in them. And from Robert A. Heinlein, at least once every human being should have to run for his life. To teach him that milk does not come from the supermarket, that safety does not come from policemen, and that news is not something that happens to other people. It's called reality, the real world, which unfortunately a lot of these Facebookists and text messengers and whatever else they play with are loath to figure out. The real world is out there and it's going to bite you in the butt. Can I say that on the air? I guess I just did.